Hey everybody, it's Boo Ray Perry from Tampa, Florida, and today we're going to talk about workflow. You don't have to be a wedding photographer like me to want to be efficient. And we take so many pictures now because of digital files, and we know it doesn't cost anything to take a picture, so we take so many. And how we manage them makes our life a little bit easier, and it makes it a little bit safer if you make sure that you've got your files backed up properly. So as a professional wedding photographer, this is what I do. These are the steps that I take from the minute I shoot my images to the minute I deliver them to my client to make sure that everything is safe and, above all, efficient and fast for me. All right, let's get started. Step number one is that I use a camera that shoots to 2 cards. Always use a camera that shoots to 2 cards. Now, of course, I don't do it all the time because I have a Fuji X100V that I use for my family work, and that's fine. But for professional work, I always shoot to 2 cards. Now, in that camera, the 2 cards, one of them is recording full-size RAW files, and these are the files that I'm going to be working on for my client. The other one is shooting full-size JPEGs, just duplicates of everything that goes to the RAW. And it's a big card, like big. Like, you know, megs and megs and megs, gigs and gigs and gigs of files. So even though I'm shooting 1,500 images at a wedding, I can usually go 3 to 6 months before I have to take that card out of my camera. So it just sits there as a constant backup of everything that I shoot. Then once I take it out, I've got 3 more cards. So I put in the latest card. I always do whatever the oldest card is, that's the one I format and start over with. So in my bag, I have a little bitty kit, and in that little bitty kit, I have all 4 of those cards, those backup cards. So I've got about 1.5 years worth of JPEGs sitting in my bag at all times. Everything I've shot professionally in the last 1.5 years in full-size JPEG is sitting in my bag. That is backup number 1. Backup number 2 is when I get to my actual computer. When I get home, I take my RAW card, I put it in, and I put everything into the computer using Capture One. Now, Capture One, I love this program. I switched from Photoshop a while back, and I'm really, really happy that I did. I love the way Capture One works, and I'll make a video about my Capture One choices at some later date. So when you import images using Capture One, you can do something that's called a session. You can do catalogs, but you can also do a session. And sessions are what I like because you can work with a session anywhere. You don't have to be in Capture One to be working with your files in a session. So when you create a session, it will create 4 folders automatically. Capture, Selects, Output, and Trash. Takes me a second. I have to think about them. It creates them in that order. Hang on a second there, Boo-Ray. That's not technically correct. It creates the folders in your file system in alphabetical order, so it looks like this. But when you look at the folders within Capture One, it looks like this. I import everything into a folder marked by date, and I mark everything by date. So if you go to my date folder for 2023, you will see all of my gigs by date. So it's date and then the name of the client. So in that folder, I've got the date of the event that I just shot, the name of the client, and I've got 4 more folders directly underneath that. It imports everything into the Capture folder. It also has an automatic backup feature. I have a separate hard drive that I call Immediate Backup. And so anytime I am bringing anything into my computer, and this includes the files that I shoot with my Fuji X100V when I'm doing my family stuff, it is immediately backed up to a second drive outside of my computer. All the RAWs go there. It automatically creates a folder, names it with the date, saves everything there. So I've got another backup. I've got one backup on all the JPEGs, right? They're sitting in my kit backed up. And now I've got a second backup of all the RAWs. They're sitting on a second drive in my office. And then all the original RAWs are sitting on my computer in the Capture folder for Capture One. That's my backup routine when I first come home from an event. I've got the images in 3 different places. Well, 4 if you count the card that they're still on, but they're not going to be on that card for long. After a day or 2, I will wipe that card. Before my next event, I'm going to wipe that card. So now I've got all those files sitting in a folder in my computer. What's my next step? Well, now it's time for what I call CCC, Cull, Crop, and correct in that order. And this is where it gets important, because over the years I have tried to develop a routine that makes it smooth and quick when I am working on my wedding files and my bar mitzvah files, because I'm dealing with so many images and it can really bog you down when you're having to work with all this stuff. So you want to make it easy and efficient, and you don't want to have to think too much about your actual system. So I do it in order. The first thing I do is the cull. So what I do is I go through all of my image, I look at each one, I bring them up on the screen, and I'm just clicking on my keyboard, right? I've got the up down is on this finger, and I've got this finger on the plus. And if you hit plus, it's going to put a color code on the image. So I'm just going click, 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 and I'm clicking through each one. And every one that I see that I think I might want to keep, I hit plus. So I'm going click, click, plus, 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 and I go through all my images doing that. Now here's the thing. You have to fight the urge to stop and work on an image. You're going to come across an image and you go, oh, that, that just needs to be brought up just a little bit. It's a little, I need to make it a little bit brighter, or maybe, no. That's not what this is for. This is the cull. Okay? Stick with the plan. Just go through and cull. So boom, 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 boom. I go through. By the time I'm finished, I've eliminated half, maybe 2/3 of the images that I shot. So I sort by color code, and everything that I didn't give a color mark goes to the trash folder. Done. Now, they're going to sit in the trash folder. The trash folder doesn't go anywhere. They're just going to sit there. So if later I find that I need something, I can go back to the trash folder and I can find it. But right now, they're gone and they're out of sight and out of mind. They're in the trash folder. So that's the first step. That's the cull. The second step is the crop. Now, you might think this is weird because usually you crop, that's the last thing that you do. And if I'm doing something like headshots, for example, yeah, cropping is the last step. But with weddings and events, I find that cropping is better to do right off the bat because, first of all, it's like a second cull. When you go through and you do the crops, a lot of times you'll find images, you know what, this image really isn't worth keeping, and that one will go. But also, if you crop everything, then when you get to the time where you're going to correct, everything looks the way you want it to look when you're delivering to the client. And that's how you want it to look when you're doing the correct stage. So now I'm going to go through and I'm going to crop every single image to the way I want to deliver it to the client. I'm going to correct the horizons. I'm going to just make sure every crop is good and looks the way I want the client to see it in terms of the composition. And in this little thing here now, when I'm doing the crops, I'm going to find more images that I kept that I decided, you know what, now that I look at them a second time, they're not worth keeping, or there's a problem with this image. And so I'm going to cull a little bit more as I'm going. That's step 2. Step 3 is the final one, and that's the correct stage. Now I've got just the images I want to deliver to my client. I've got them cropped the way I want them cropped. So now I go through image by image and I correct them. I correct the color, the saturation, the white balance, the exposure. I correct for my blown highlights. I correct my levels. I correct everything I want to do that I can do in Capture One to make this image as good as possible. I don't do masking. Right? This is just what I call slider correcting, where I correct each image to where it looks good, what I call a printable image, an image that absolutely is ready to go to the printer. The only thing it lacks is high-end retouching, which I do not do to the images that get delivered to my client. I only do that to images that go into albums or get printed, because what I'm delivering to my client is an archive, sometimes 500 images from the wedding. So it's an archive of their images, but still they should be good, color corrected, ready to print images. And to be honest, when I'm doing an album, probably 95% of the images that go in the album don't require any work whatsoever past what I've done before I deliver them to the client. They're good and they're ready to go. Really, the retouching starts to come in with a close-up of someone's face, where you want to go and do some work there or something like that. But at this point, the correcting that I do makes these images really ready to go. So I go through, I correct everything, and that's it. Now I'm done. I've culled, I've corrected, I've cropped, and these images are ready to deliver to the client. I export them as full-size JPEG images. They will export automatically into the output folder. I then take them out of that folder and I put them in the selects folder. That's just my little thing. I like it to be in order. So my RAWs are in this folder, my JPEGs are in this folder, and then the last folder is where I will put anything that I hand retouch. Like if someone orders a print and I hand retouch it, that's where I save it, in that last folder. So I always know my very best images are there in that folder. So once I've saved everything as a high-res JPEG, then I'm ready to deliver them to my client. I can put them online, or I can put them in a drive if that's how I'm delivering, or whatever I'm doing. They are ready and they are done. Now, once I've delivered to my client and this entire event is over, and I'm done. Everything sits on my computer. And then about once a quarter, at the end of every quarter, I go back to the previous year's quarter and I delete them off of my hard drive. But first, I take my selects and I take my output files and I copy them to two separate drives, Archive 1 and Archive 2. So I have two other drives where I copy the final product. You got me? Two other drives. Then I delete everything off of my main drive and I delete everything off of my immediate backup drive. Remember when I saved the RAWs when I first got started? I deleted there. So your final images from your wedding are saved on two separate drives outside of my computer in Archive Drive 1 and Archive Drive 2. And of course you have a copy as well, which is pretty good. I mean, there's 3 copies of your files, and for 18 months all of your files are also sitting in my kit. It's still sitting on the JPEG backup drive. So that's it. That's step by step. It's not exciting. I know it's not the most interesting video in the world, but it is important because it shows you how a professional photographer works through their system. And we all have our own systems. And now one of the questions you may have right off the bat is, why don't you back up online? Why don't you use an online backup? And the truth is, it's because I have just so many files that if I use an online backup, my computer would just constantly be uploading and constantly be uploading. Not to mention, so many of the files that you bring into the computer are worthless files. 2/3 of what you shoot gets trashed. So paying and spending the time to have those all backed up when I first come home, it's just too much. And also, I deliver pretty quick. My clients have their files within 3 weeks of the wedding. So after that, it's out of my hands. I save them for my own usage and stuff like that. But once I've given you your images, it's up to you to back up and save your images. You know, worst case scenario. But I do back up and save them, but it's not my job to back them up and save them for years for you. It's your job to back up and save your images. Listen, don't forget to check out my website. It's called BlueRayPerry.com. And if you go there to my education tab, you will find all the free stuff that I have for everyone who watches my channel. I've got a couple of great ebooks on things you should do to your camera when you first buy your camera, and the definitions that you should know if you want to be a professional photographer. I've also got a great ebook on how to work with natural light. I've got a great video on how to work with off-camera light, and you can even sign up for private coaching sessions with me one-on-one, where we will teach you everything that you need to know about being a photographer. They're great because you can ask me any question and I will go down any rabbit hole and make sure that you understand what you need to understand to be a professional photographer. So be sure and check it out. Also, follow me on Instagram and Threads and join my group on Facebook called Pro Photo Talk with Blue Ray Perry. I'll see you here next time.